Power creep is a nasty thing in any game, where in one version of the game you could have something be absolutely dominant and metagame defining, just a few updates later you could see that character become virtually non-existent and unviable. Pokemon might just be the poster child for this effect, but whereas other games can have updates to try to address these issues, Pokemon players find themselves waiting for the next generation of the games to possibly see their favorite gain some kind of buff, which more than likely they won't. But over the years we've seen various Pokemon go from being among the strongest in the format to just being MIA a few months later. So today, let's talk about Pokemon's greatest fall-offs. If you enjoyed this video at any point in time, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. As a matter of fact, you should really just subscribe right now because I have a playlist full of content just like this that you can watch once this video ends. And if you think you're subscribed, do me a favor and double check because only like half my viewers actually are. With that, let's get into the video. Okay, so this video is accidentally a top 5, but just know that I didn't intend to do it that way. But since that's the vibe, we're going to go ahead and just order it, with 5 being a pretty notable fall-off and 1 being a generational crash out. With that, let's begin with Regieleki. This one's pretty funny, as it took just a single generation for Game Freak to realize that they really messed up when making this thing. Regieleki is a pure electric type with less than average defensive stats, a decent 100 in both offensive stats, and the highest speed stat in the game at 200. It's likely that there will never be a Pokemon that will ever exceed the speed stat without multipliers. 200 is enough for Regieleki to outspeed the next fastest Pokemon, Deoxys Speed, by just investing 96 points into its speed stat with a timid nature. Normally, having such a high speed stat would allow for you to use your leftover stats to bolster your bulk and make sure that you can actually eat a hit or two, and in VGC this was the case for a solid couple of weeks, until people realized that Regieleki was busted, forcing the Regieleki Speed Wars to begin, and for optimal Regieleki to just go max speed investment as to make sure you had a shot to win the speed tie against the other Regieleki that you would inevitably face. And the reason Regieleki was such an omnipresent force in the metagame was due to its ability to slow down any Pokemon it outspeeds with the move Electro Web, allowing for a partner to outspeed and attack. But on a dime, it could also just Dynamax and turn into a one-shotting machine with Max Lightning. This is because although Regioleki's special attack stat was only 100, its ability Transistor gave it a passive 50% increase to its attacking stat whenever it used an electric move. As you could imagine, this kinda stung. But with Regieleki dominating Generation 8, Game Freak did something unprecedented. Normally, when Pokemon come in duos, if Game Freak's going to balance the game by nerfing or buffing one of them, they'll just do it to both. Because of this, many people believe that Regioleki's nerf would result in the same happening for Regidrago, who really wouldn't have deserved the nerf. But no, for once Game Freak nerfed Transistor from 1.5 times to 1.3 times and left Regidrago's ability of Dragon's Maw at its original 1.5 times multiplier. This resulted in Regidrago becoming one of the most powerful sweepers in the game in Generation 9, as Regieleki struggled to find any usage whatsoever. This is mainly because its offensive power is severely nerfed without the option to Dynamax, along with items like the Covert Cloak and Clear Amulet blocking the stat drops of Electroweb. In the end, Regieleki would only have a few good tournament runs here and there in Generation 9, far cry from its dominance in Gen 8. Still got banned in singles though. Our next biggest fall off goes to Palafin, who didn't even need a nerf or generation to pass for it to stop seeing usage. Upon the release of Scarlet and Violet, many players saw just how powerful Palafin hero form could be. While initially Palafin would start off in its base form with some pretty unimpressive stats, simply by switching out and back in, it would gain a huge increase in its stats and a massive 160 base attack. Along with this, Palafin had the exclusive move of Jet Punch, a 60 base power priority water move. While it may not seem terribly strong, 60 base power off of a 160 base attack stat is enough to chunk even the bulkiest of Pokemon, especially with Terra Water and Mystic Water as the held item. At the start of Generation 9 VGC, Palafin saw heavy usage on rain teams, allowing for them to secure huge damage off a Wave Crash and functioning as a Dondozo check by clicking Haze to remove its boosts. Despite its initial success, over time Palafin saw competition from Intimidate Gyarados edge it out of the spotlight, as Gyarados' utility and immunity to ground moves allowed for it to much better deal with the fissure spamming Ting-Lu in Regulation C. This drop in usage was only exacerbated as Rillaboom and Urshifu Rapid Strike re-entered the metagame in future regulations, providing a hard check and unbeatable competition for Palafin respectively. The format of Regulation H ended up banning Urshifu, granting Palafin one last shot at relevance, and once again players found themselves using the powerful sweeper on their teams to deal massive damage and blow holes in opposing teams, but it soon fell out of style once again, with Rillaboom remaining a metagame staple and the likes of Archaludon proving to be too hard of a matchup for Palafin to deal with, making Palafin the only Pokemon on this list to fall off not once, but twice in a single generation. This isn't to say it's not powerful, the metagame just hasn't been kind to it. Still got banned in singles though. Okay, now for some true crash outs. With the 2 Pokemon that you gotta admit are still kinda solid out of the way, we're left with 3 Pokemon that legitimately have had some of the biggest falls from grace the game has ever seen. Tapu Bulu is just a sad case. Originally upon release in Gen 7, Tapu Bulu felt like the product of power creep, a grass fairy type with 130 base attack, grassy terrain upon hitting the field, and access to wood hammer had to be good. And it was. In Generation 7, Tapu Bulu was not only a common sight in VGC 2017, but it was also an important piece of Komodo teams in VGC 2018. Not only did it provide important recovery to teammates with grassy terrain, but being able to one-shot opposing Tapus with a single wood hammer allowed for Komodo to set up without fear of getting one-shot by a fairy type attack. Arguably, the funniest part of what I'm about to tell you is that Tapu Bulu wasn't even close to being the best Tapu in VGC or singles. Once Generation 8 dropped, Terrain received a much-needed nerf by reducing the boost that they gave to their respective types from 1.5 times to 1.3 times. They also gained a brand new set of Terrain Surge users, with Electric Terrain being set by Pincurchin, Misty Terrain being set by Galarian Weezing, Psychic Terrain being set by both Indeedee, and Grassy Terrain being set by Rillaboom. Where every other new terrain set was either outright weaker than their Tapu counterpart or had a different use case, Rillaboom was just a direct upgrade to Tapu Bulu. Yes, Rillaboom had slightly lower attack, but it made up for it with its access to important moves like Fake Out, U-Turn, and even Knockoff. And its damage output was very similar to Tapu Bulu's, only it was a much safer and splashable Pokemon to put onto teams. Where Tapu Bulu was a very specific pick for certain archetypes, Rillaboom soon became one of the most common Pokemon in the metagame. But what really sealed the deal for Tapu Bulu was that Rillaboom had access to one of the most busted moves in the history of the game. Come Generation 8's DLC, the move Grassy Glide was introduced. This 70 base power physical grass move gained +1 priority if grassy terrain was active. This made it one of the most powerful moves in the game that could chunk or just one-shot many prominent water types in the meta. At this point, with Rillaboom having greater speed, utility, and power over Tapu Bulu became a rare case of a legendary Pokemon being outclassed by a starter. Here's to hoping that they finally buff my boy by giving him a physical fairy move. Then maybe he won't be so washed. Speaking of washed, Rotom. What really happened here? When Rotom Wash and a few of its other forms were seen as some of the greatest and most reliable Pokemon in competition. Well, maybe not reliable, Aaron Zang has first-hand experience with that, but the Rotom forms all share the same stat spread, with some pretty impressive numbers like 86 speed, 107 in both defenses, and 105 special attack. But things fall apart as soon as you see that puny 50 HP stat. You see, in previous generations, simply maxing out the HP stat would be enough to give Rotom some pretty respectable bulk, especially after landing a Will-O-Wisp. But here's the thing, in previous generations, 50 HP got you a lot further, since most moves you encountered capped out at around 80 or 90 base power, at least the accurate moves. But more and more, we see Pokemon gaining access to moves at 100 base power or higher with very little to no drawbacks. Before, Rotom would need to eat moves like Dragon Pulse, Thunderbolt, and Giga Drain, but now it's having to tank Choice Band, Wicked Blow, and crit Ivy Cudgel. It just isn't happening anymore. The average power of moves going into Rotom has increased to the point that it's going to need a little more than a Citrus Berry to get a third turn on the field. Rotom used to see high usage at the highest level of play at the World Championships, but its usage in VGC has slowly been dwindling over the years. Rotom Wash, Heat, and Mow all had their moments in VGC, but things are dire. So dire that you could legitimately make the case that the best Rotom form in VGC right now is Rotom Frost. This is simply because Specs Terra Ice Blizzard is a decent strategy right now. Yeah, no, these things belong on the clearance shelf at this point. Finally, our all-time biggest VGC falloff has to go to Snorlax. When I tell you that Gen 7 Snorlax was a different beast, I can't stress enough just how strong it was. Let me explain what was going on. Early Gen 7 VGC was an extremely slow format, with Pokemon like Celesteela, Arcanine, and Snorlax hanging around for a very long time. It sometimes felt like you were playing two singles matches at the same time, and a big reason for this was because of the introduction of the pinch berries. These items were berries which the user would hold and consume at 25% health or lower, but they would heal for 50% of the user's health. Beyond this, there wasn't just one pinch berry, there were 5, so multiple Pokemon on a team could have this massive burst in health. By far, the best pinch berry user was Snorlax. This was because Snorlax had access to the ability Gluttony, which causes the user to consume its berry earlier. Snorlax would eat its berry and heal for 50% of its health whenever it hit 50% or lower, meaning that it could combine Belly Drum with a Pinch Berry to maximize its attack stat and heal back up to full, then sweep through whole teams with 102 base power return. Snorlax's ability to be slapped onto the end of teams with a partner Trick Room Mimikyu made it a very splashable secondary mode for many teams, and its dominance led to one of the biggest nerfs in the history of the game. Come Generation 8, Snorlax would lose 2 huge tools that led to its power in Gen 7. The first of these was the Pinch Berries. These were reworked to only heal 33% of the user's health at 25% or lower, a far cry cry from the double value that they had over Citrus Berry in Generation 7. And with the healing not being as much while still requiring the user to hit very low health, they saw much lower usage and became extremely niche. Most of the time, you'd actually just prefer the Citrus Berry since it's consistent. Now, even if Snorlax wanted to go for its Belly Drum combo, it'd be left at 88% health maximum, making it much easier to knock out after it sets up. And the next huge loss for Snorlax was the removal of the move Return. Because Return was a 102 base power normal move with no drawbacks, it was rare for Snorlax to ever run another normal attack. And at this high base power, it allowed for Snorlax to not need to invest much into its attack stat, if at all, since the ×4 multiplier from Belly Drum was enough for it to one-shot most targets. But with its next best move being the 85 base power Body Slam, it stopped being able to pick up important one-shots on many metagame staples like defensive Incineroars and other neutral targets. Snorlax very quickly was discovered to be sort of a noob trap in Generation 8, with players moving away from it altogether in favor of other Trick Room sweepers. And even in Generation 9, without Dynamax, Snorlax continues to see barely any usage. This is due to other powerful normal types like the Ursalunas providing it too great of competition, and Urshifu being able to one-shot it behind Protect. As it turns out, Snorlax's natural predator was bears all along. It seemed like the full wrath of Game Freak came down onto Snorlax to prevent it from ever seeing relevance again. But I don't know, I kinda liked it when it was broken. Those are competitive Pokemon's 5 biggest fall-offs. Did I miss any? I know it's a VGC video, but I'm curious what the singles equivalents of these would be. Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It'd mean the world to me. And if you want to support me further, you can check out my Patreon page or become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button below the video. This gets you sneak peeks at future videos and even some bonus content. You also see your name at the end of my videos like all these lovely people. Special thanks to my most boosted supporters, Ant Media UK, Avatar67, and Kayla Thompson for their generous pledges. Another way to support me is to check out all the videos on the playlist on screen right now. I know you'll find something in there that you'll enjoy. I also have a second channel where I talk about the current VGC metagame trends and a Twitch channel where I stream, both of which are in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.